Thanks for coming back to listen to part 2. This half gets even more moving and at times intense. Again, warning for adult language and the sensitive topic of grief. If you haven't heard part 1 of this episode, I would suggest you begin there. Let's get back to Eve Simon here on Jackie Just Chatters.
There was some relief in being able to share to talk about grief, because as a culture, we don't talk about grief. And even less so as a generation, we're not talking enough about it. And every single one of us is going to go through the loss of a parent and both parents. And you're not prepared for it.
I am so glad you talked about it. And I love the fact that you left the crying, because I think we need more role models of how you get through grief. I know somebody who recently lost their partner, and they were devastated. And that was the first person who was in that inner sanctum that they'd lost. I mean, you lose people, but everyone has that tight group that everyone in it is like family, and those just knock you for a loop.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no
And
question.
because I had been through a similar kind of loss, I could give some advice, and I'm like, okay, these are things to expect. Like, kind of the numbness, the memory loss, that this is going to take so much longer than you think. Do not think in days, weeks, talk months and years.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people like us who are, we talk about sort of left brain, right brain, whichever it is. I like to have some tasks to do. That's one of the reasons I can sort of stay on track doing all these different things, is that I know one thing to the next thing. I can switch and I have time to switch. Sometimes there's no tasks to do. Sometimes the tasks are internal, and it's going to his funeral. And how do you survive that? And how do you survive the time afterwards when you've buried your loved one? It's there's a podcast out there that actually helped me when we recorded ours, which is Anderson Cooper's, talks about
Mm.
grief. He has a new one. I forget the name of it, but it talks about his mother, because his mother was Gloria Vanderbilt, and they sold her apartment after she died, or they had her apartment. They just put it up for market, and then they had to get rid of all the stuff that was in it, but she'd been in it for 30, 40 years. So
Mm.
he is a GenXer, and he kept everything in. And you're used to seeing the giggling Anderson Cooper. You're used to seeing the news Anderson Cooper. It was better to hear what he was going through as a human, to know that it's okay, and to know that it's, like you said, it's gonna take longer than you expect. And I didn't know that'd be the case. I went to see a therapist. I have a therapist from many years back, not a grief therapist, but a therapist. And I was like, I'm just gonna get through my birthday, which was November 5th. And he died September 11th. So I'm just gonna get through my birthday, and once I get through all that shit, then I can focus on this other stuff. And it became clear by the week before my birthday. It's like I'm not gonna get through my birthday, okay, if I don't see a therapist first, because that's someone who can help calm you down, or they can help unravel and fill in the blanks. Because you mentioned memory loss, grief brain is serious. And the fact that you don't remember things, or the fact that Courtney, who's on my show, when we talked about it, she's like, I couldn't keep anything in order. I couldn't, things that I remember teaching for 30 years, I couldn't teach anymore. And she had to put sticky notes everywhere.
Yep.
So everybody has a way of dealing with it, and we don't talk about it. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have listened to anyone talk about it until I lost a parent, which is the hard part. You really should be prepared for it. I'm lucky in the fact that my father prepared as best as he could, right? But he had a biopsy on the 4th of August. Before he went into the biopsy, he called his lawyer, he called his accountant, he called his financial guy. He said, "Is everything settled?" And for the most part, everything was there. But there's shit that you find, of course, and it gets you in the gut every single fucking time. But for the most part, we didn't have to go through probate, which was good,
Nice.
because that sucks.
Yeah. Oh, when you're probate is a nightmare, and when you are at probably one of the worst moments of your life, it's I don't even know what's like a double nightmare. That's it. That's just what it is.
Yeah, it is. And so we're grateful we didn't have to do that. It didn't help Denial is a very strong emotion during that time, and different
Oh, yeah.
generations. My mother is on the edge of boomer and silent generation, and she admitted to me, I think one of the before I came back home on the 1st of October, she's like, "I didn't think he'd die. I really didn't think he'd die." And I can't imagine what she's going through. That generation is stiff upper lip all the way, so you're not gonna see it, and when you do, it's because it built up, and we had a couple of those where she flat out lost it, and then what am I supposed to do? Because I gotta, you spend a lot of time during grief, like you said, comforting other people because they're so distraught. She had every right to be distraught,
Yeah.
but it puts you in a position that you just don't quite know what to do because the partner gets a lot of attention too. And Courtney brought this up on our show where the child sometimes gets skipped over a little bit because
Mm.
60-year-old partnership, 53-year-old child. I mean, it just it's different, and I never really thought about that till she mentioned it, that her father was getting all the attention when her mother died, and no one asked Courtney how she felt. So in retrospect, you look back and say, I did have a great community, actually. I still do, that checks in on me. Send a little text every once in a while saying, just look it out. How you doing? How are things going? Um, I love you. That's all you really need. You don't, if someone just says, what can I do for you? You can't answer that. So there's, the trauma is really trauma. I mean, everyone talks about
It is.
PTSD. It is 100% trauma, and worse. I wasn't with him when he passed. If I had been with him when he passed, that would be my vision of him, and that would have been devastating to have forever. So, see, there it goes. There it goes.
But it's good. Like, your body will tell you what you need, and see, I think the crying is so good. It's getting it out. It's getting out in little pieces at a time. And, like, it sounds so I wish we could have the medals, and I wish we could go up to that person, and it would sound so ridiculous, but to just tell them, "I see you.
Yeah.
I
I,
understand you."
right. And I'm here,
And
and that's what you need the
yes.
most during that
Right.
time. A friend of mine lost her brother, and there's nothing you can do. He shouldn't have died. And every day or two, I just text her a heart. That's it. And she knows
Yes.
I'm here. And that's
Yep.
sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do versus how you doing today. And she's actually spoken to me and said, someone asked how I'm doing, and she's like, how the fuck do you think I'm doing?
Right.
Because
Right. And it's automatic, like, that's our greeting, and it's the
right.
stupidest thing, we gotta change that, like,
Yeah.
"How are you doing?" should not be "Hello." Say
Right.
"Hello."
Right. Hello, or I see you. I see you is I think a fabulous, maybe it's the last thing you say to somebody when you say, keep in touch. I see you. Whatever it is, that phrase is very helpful to somebody who's in trauma once they can get out of the initial trauma and they can see it. 5 months in, I can see a little bit more of it. I'm sure I'll see more next month, and I'm sure I'll see more next month. But then grief's not linear. So it's not like you do this and then you get better and you do this and you do this. It'll come right back to the crying, and it'll come
Yep.
right back to I can't get out of bed today because it's how grief works.
Yep.
It's maddening.
I had a friend who lost a parent in the last year, and I went to the viewing and, we chatted and we hugged and all that, and I said, "I want you to know I am here whenever you want me. I'm not going to text you. I'm not going to message you. I'm going to leave you alone whenever. I don't care when it is. If you need me, I'm here. But I know for a very long time, you don't want to be burdened by other people's crap. And you're going to be numb, and then you're going to be sad when the numb leaves." Because when you're in the numb phase, you kind of think you're going crazy, and it's very uncomfortable. But then when it goes away, you realize, "Oh my god, that was a gift. I want the numb back."
Right, because the pain is so sharp at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I know how terrible this is gonna be, and you have a million things to deal with. I'm like, you just let me know when you're ready for me to be in your life. The last thing I want is to be one more freaking burden on your life.
It,
I'm
it's
here.
a good approach, and it's a fine line to putting myself in their shoes. It's a fine line to be when somebody is in pain, because the human aspect of all of us is to reach out and to help, and you don't know how to, and you don't know how to show up for that person, and you don't know how to be present, you don't know what's bugging them, you don't know what's too little or too much. It's sometimes it'll come from the person, like I heard very clearly from Lori, just sort of like, just tell me you love me, and I'll reach out when I know you're out there. I ping her this hard every once in a while. Just tell me you love me, and then when you need me to be present to listen, I'm here. The people who actually did that, a lot of people did in the beginning, and I lost track of them. But when, like I said, I came home October 1st and had to start grieving all over again because my mother's grieving process was very different, and I had to be there to look after her. And then I
Right.
came
It
home and I was
postponed yours.
right. So mine was pretty deep, and the first people who I actually spoke to coming out of that happened to be women who lost a father. Didn't do that on purpose. It just happened
Nice.
to be women who lost their father. And some of them lost them, like my cousin lost hers in her early 20s. She's 52. Another friend lost one 6 years ago. And so hearing the stories of what they went through with that father figure, and they were all close to their fathers, which is different. Some people are close to their parents and not, was helpful to hear that, again, like you said, I wasn't going crazy. That's just what you have to do. And it's just, you don't put a name on it. And if you have to sit there and you have to cry and cry and cry and cry and cry, you have to cry and cry and cry and cry. After the piece that you mentioned, I wrote something. I guess he died September. I think I wrote this in January, maybe January. I think it was mid-January, and it was called "Girl Dad." It was about him and about the grief and about what was going on. And I wrote it over. It just spilled out over a course of 2 days, and I cried the entire time. Like there was just no way around it. Um, and I didn't edit a whole lot of it because it was like, this is where your head's at. This is why you're talking about this. This is, but the thing that you mentioned about my writing, I used to use it to get shit out. And during the period of time when I needed to get out of my head, that was gone. Talk about left brain, right brain. My therapist told me that right brain or creative people are able to function during grief, but they're not able to do more analytical things or executive function things, because that's the other side of your brain, and that's the one that grief brain wipes out. So the
Yes.
notion of being able to write and to get things out that way was gone. And so you're like,
Yeah.
what the fuck do I do right now? You're left to your own devices, you're left to your community. You're left to sit and cry, but then still have to put on a good face for your mother because she now calls you every day. Yeah. So it has been I'm always reminded during this time, my father would have been very upset with me to feel this deeply, but
You
can't
know
stop.
what? That's the cost of love.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
love someone that deeply, there there is gonna be a bill to pay. There
Right.
there is there is an edge to that knife, and when you lose them, it is going to cut deep. It's not going to be a paper cut. But
No.
even when that knife is stuck deep into your heart and somebody says, "Okay, I will take this knife out. I will take the pain away," but you'd have to love them less. All that love for them would have to be gone. You would say, "Leave that knife right there.
Yeah.
Do not take it away. It is worth it."
It's what you do. It's unfortunately why it still hurts. It's unfortunately why I'm still crying right now, because um it lessens a little bit. For me, it lessens a little bit. The cancer piece of it is tricky because a lot of people have cancer and it goes on forever, and then they get a remission, they come back up. A parent with cancer is a tricky experience. We had it for a very brief period of time, and I was very upset at how fast it went, because he went from being diagnosed around the 4th of August to being passed away on the 11th of September. But the more that I read about this disease, he was lucky. And while it was good for him to not suffer through it, and it was shitty for all of us on the outside to be like, wait, what? Why are you gone? Um, I don't think I could have survived the years of decline or even the months of decline only for this disease to return. Um, so you have to find the bright spots. I have to find little luckiness. Like I'm glad Daddy didn't suffer. I'm glad we found it and they were able to keep you from suffering. Take it on yourself. Sorry.
That's okay.
Um, but you're true. You're right, because if I had that choice to not feel this way by taking the knife out, I wouldn't do it because I'm terrified of losing him. Terrified of losing his memory.
Well, here I see kind of a bright spot of it. He loved you so much, and I can tell that because of your love for him. It was, one of those things back when we were young and a friend of ours was dating somebody. I never had to see who they were dating to know if they were good and treated them well. Alls I knew my friend, and I just looked at them and I could immediately tell if this was a good person or a bad person. And, every interaction, everything I've read, everything, it's so clear to me. He gave you so much love. And what a gift that is to have somebody love you that much. And no one can take that from you ever. That is yours to keep as long as you talk about him
Yeah.
and think about him. He's never going anywhere. Like, I don't know if you know, if you go back and you listen to some of this, multiple times you mentioned him in present tense
Yeah, I do. I
because he's
do.
still with you.
Right.
His body's not here, but it doesn't matter. He's still your dad. That's not past tense. Present tense. He's your father, and he's
Yeah.
always going to be your father. And you don't have to let that go ever.
It's true, and I think it's something that you got to get used to, and then you have to learn not to listen to other people because some people will tell you, "Well, you got to wrap up this grief." Or you can't be the girl who lost her father forever. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I actually can. It's just how I
Yes.
do it. And it's not up to you to decide how that goes. And you also talk to a lot of people, I'm sure you have, of people who have lost parents. They have lost friends and they have lost loved ones
Yeah.
over this because true colors come out of who's there and who's not. And that has happened. And, I'm sad, more in the loss, but my father is worth more than that. So
I
that's where it is.
I lost one of my closest friends. It was my sister's best friend, but we knew each other back in junior high. All
Long
three
time.
of us. And, in July, my sister and I had stood up in her marriage for her wedding that she had gotten remarried, and we were so excited. And God, what a gift that was. Like, we got to spend so much time with her planning the wedding, that joy that comes, and you remember old things and you're looking forward to the future, and it's just beautiful. And in November, she had a clot in her lung and just died suddenly. She
Yeah.
was 40 or 41.
Jesus.
Yeah. They didn't realize it ran in their family. Like, there had been grandma had died of one, but they never did a postmortem. They didn't realize, but when you heard the story of grandma's, you're like, "Oh, that makes sense." And her sister had problems with clotting, and we're like, "Oh my no, like, okay, this is now an official family history." And nobody knew. And I oh my god, I was just so it was so strange because my sister called me and told me, and I shouted in the phone. I'm like, "No, no, this is not true. Like, no." Like, I could not accept it. And then I was talking to the staff at my school, and I was telling them, and they're like, "Oh my god, what do you need?" I'm like, I have no idea. I'm
Right.
like, "I can tell
Right.
you right now, I'm in shock. I'm feeling absolutely nothing, and this is so weird. Like, it's gonna hit me, and then I'll need time off, but until then, the next day I went into school. I
Yeah.
taught, and, my coworker was like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I don't know what to do."
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how to function. I like you talked about that your brain doesn't work. So I would teach. So I just and it was a way to get out of myself. Like I have a lesson plan. I'm going to go just do this lesson plan and just do that, and I acted like a robot, like normal, like my students would have no idea. And then I got home that day and boom, floodgates open, and I called the
That was
principal.
it.
I'm like,
And
"Yep,
that was
I'm
it.
done. I'm
Yeah.
I'm out for the next week. This is not going to happen." And I have been so lucky because my sister and I are so like we were all close and her sister as well. Like there was like, sisters and sisters that I get to talk about her all the time. I talk about her probably every week. There will be something, and I'll call my sister like, "Oh my god, I thought about her," and then we'll laugh about this thing or, something comes up and, "Oh, she would have loved this," and I feel like she's part of her's, like, not gone because I get to talk about her all the time, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is the best way to get over grief. Never
Yeah.
let that person die. Keep talking. Keep sharing."
And talk to them. I think I that's struggle it's a struggle for me because if I talk to my dad, sometimes you can't understand what I say because I'm crying, I'm saying it through tears. But when you're alone in your room, it's okay to talk to your dead dad. I mean, I guess it's weird, but I do. Um, I know that you're publishing this later, but the Super Bowl just happened, and my father and I were big Eagles fans, and he died the day
Oh,
of their season opener. And in my mind, winning of the Super Bowl would have been the closure, and that would have solved everything in my life and solved all the grief. And of course, that didn't happen. And of course, they didn't win for Dad, even though I wanted them to. But they came close, and I felt weird having that discussion with my father's ghost, whatever's around. I'm like, Dad, I'm so sorry they didn't do it. I'm still here, but they didn't do it. I wish they'd done it for you because that's what we were pushing for. I'm a sports person and I'm a Philly girl at heart, but I'm not so hardcore Eagles, except the fact my dad loved them. So in the days since, it's been a little interesting because that's put me back a little bit because I was going to be like, yay, they won for him, yay. And they didn't. So it's, all the things you do when you're dealing with grief and you attribute good things to the person who has passed. I don't know what to do with this one because
but you know
it,
what?
it's not where it should be.
It's exactly where it should be. It
Yeah.
made you closer to your dad.
Yeah. During those
During
games,
that game, you watched it with your dad.
I did. And we would
S
watch it every year. He'd call me. We FaceTimed every day since the pandemic. And on Sundays when Eagles would play, my mother a couple years ago stopped letting him watch them live because he would scream at the TV. And
That's the only way
she
to
thought
watch it.
right, and she thought he'd have a heart attack. So she made him DVR all the Eagles games and then find out the score later. And if they won, he could watch it. And if they didn't win, he had to delete it. So it got to the point that I couldn't talk to my dad during the games because he wasn't watching them live. But we would talk about it afterwards, and then we talk about other games. But I really I missed that this year. And every time the Eagles would play, I'd watch them, or I'd not watch them because I thought I was cursing them, and I didn't want to curse them because I wanted them to win for Dad. It was interesting that even though I couldn't call him normally. Last year, I couldn't call him normally, and I couldn't call him now. Obviously, you're right. There was a presence during those 4 quarters that just helped. It just helped a little bit. And then it goes away because, again, grief's not linear. So you're like, okay, yay, dad, they won for you. They won for you. And then it's like, it's over. And it's like, well, fuck, back to myself. So you're right in calling it PTSD. You're right in calling it trauma. But you're also right that if you didn't love as much as you do, and you did, and you always will, none of that would matter. And you wouldn't be human. You wouldn't have empathy. You wouldn't have love.
Okay.
Okay.
I was going to ask about, like, talk about your pandemic thing and
Yeah.
mention the Gen X story, but holy crap, I don't even know how I'm gonna edit this.
I don't know either. It's up.
So,
Good luck.
thank you. Thank you so much for your support.
It's hard. No, but you could probably link through the writing. Because I do a lot of writing. I did a lot of writing before this all happened with Dad, and I had in the pandemic the things you learn in pandemic. Because in the very beginning, none of us knew what we were doing. And in the very beginning, I would sit outside on my balcony to do my work because I work for myself, and I would see people across the street doing some random things. This woman doing some random things, and I'd see her day after day after day after day after day. And then every once in a while, a male showed up and hung out with her and then went away. It was at night. It was in the morning. It didn't matter. There was a dog once. And I made up this story, probably like my father would have done, which is, oh, they're spies. Of course they're spies. There's spies across the street from me. What are the spies doing today? What do they do at 9:35 at night? Okay, they're sitting outside in the rain. Cool. Those are the spies. And it wound its way into something that I wrote for Medium because who else has spies across the street from them? And what else are you going to do? I mean, someone suggested that I send over a drone with a little sign that says, "Hi, I'm your neighbor across the street," and I figured they'd kill me. So
Yes, that was
didn't
probably yeah, I wouldn't have done that. Nope.
didn't do that. It's across the street, so I don't know. I mean, it's not like you probably couldn't tell because there's so many apartments. You probably couldn't tell that I was watching them. But it became a game every day. What are the spies doing today? And then people would ask me on Facebook, "Hey, how are the spies today?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, they're out today. Yeah. Oh, well, she's sweating. Oh, she doesn't look happy. Oh, damn, dog's back." I mean, it was just it just became a game of what to do when you couldn't do anything and when you couldn't see a person, which was sort of interesting. Like you really couldn't hang out with humans, and so a distance spy was a good choice. So that got me through much of the pandemic, pretty much, because it helped me. My father, I will tell you this, my father asked me about the spies. I mentioned it during one of our FaceTimes, and he's like, "What are the spies doing today?" And I looked behind me because I was on my couch, and I turned my screen, and I'm like, "Dad, can you see them? They're right there." He goes, "Oh, yeah, spies." It's just what
Uh,
it is. So,
to get through the pandemic, we all did
crazy
various
shit.
things. Other people did that starter bread dough crap.
Oh, sourdough. Fuck no.
Yeah. You found spies.
I found spies. And not only did I find spies, I found people who wanted to know about the spies and other people who were very concerned that I found the spies because everyone's like, don't answer your door if someone knocks on it. I'm like, how are they gonna find me? I'm across the street and up 5 flights. They're like, don't worry about it. They're spies. They're gonna come get you. So it became this game for people who couldn't hang out with each other. We couldn't, we did Zoom happy hours. That's how I got into a lot of other things. But we did ways to sort of connect with each other. But the spies were a commonality, even though they didn't have their own spies, that we could talk about, which was kind of fun. But
And we
I
needed
have to
that.
say, they've since moved. I've noticed it. I think I noticed it about a year ago or less than a year ago that the blinds changed. Everyone's like, "Why are you looking at this shit? You are now the person spying on people." I'm like, but maybe, but so what?
You're a
You
good
know,
meeting stalker.
I'm a stalker. They're a spy. There's a difference. There's a difference. So, but it was a good thing to sort of sink my brain into, and then to keep coming up with stories about them and come up with taglines about them and figure out. My mother got into it. I told her about it, and she's like, "Do they look like they're affectionate?" I'm like, "I don't know." She goes, "Are they a couple or are they a fake couple?" I'm like, "I don't know." She's like, and mom really got into it. She goes, "Does he put his hand on her shoulder?" And I'm like, "I'll look next time." I don't fucking know. So the spies became a thing, which is kind of awesome because it's nice when everybody's behind something that is positive. We're not all behind
Yes.
grief. We're behind something that's like a fun little story that's probably they were just probably a nice little random couple that lived across the street, maybe. Or maybe they're
COVID, how you got through it, you came up with spy stories. Me,
right.
I wrote my first manuscript.
Right? But I think that's an interesting point because we found creative ways to get through something that was pretty traumatic. Again, if
Yes.
you think about trauma, is if you really want to sink into it and all the people who were dying and you mentioned another piece I wrote called Thank You Pandemic, which was about, and I don't want to minimize all the shit, the terrible shit that we went through. I don't want to say this was an amazing period of time that we could all connect in different ways because we could, but it's a terrible thing that happened. So you have to acknowledge that. And as a human, how do you respond to it and make it not torture you night after night after night after night? And some people watch the news, some people donated. I did too. Some people had spies.
Okay. I'm gonna put all your social media links in my episode notes.
Okay.
Real quick, where can people find you?
Bunch of places. So my business website is evesimoncreative.com, and I am a designer, as I mentioned. So that is my little shingle. Our podcast is called GenX Stories, and it's about how the lost generation found itself. And you can find it at genxstories.com. We try and keep things straight. And the social media associated with that is at GenX Stories on Instagram. I have a personal Instagram called at naive, Naieve, I think is my personal Instagram. But it's not the most exciting thing in the world. But that's how those are the things that I'm out there. You can also find me. We'll put a link to my Medium because a lot of the stories that we talked about are
Yes.
are on Medium,
I
and
will
and
definitely
it's
put that there.
it's cool to be able to have all those things. A lot of people don't, and so I'm excited to be able to have both the design part of it, and as you mentioned way back a couple hours ago, the parts of my brain that go to writing, the parts of my brain that go to designing, the parts of my brain that go to podcasting. It's all storytelling. It's all like
Yep.
what you do when you're with your podcast here. So they're all just different avenues for storytelling. And I encourage people to find the things, not just one. If it's not just one, find the things that make you happy and then just go for it and see what happens.
Well, I am so happy you made time to come on my show and chat with me about all kinds of topics. Wow, it got deep.
It got, we didn't intend to talk about grief that much, but we did. I'm sorry about that.
That's you know what? No. I it's authentic and I we need to talk about it. It's real.
It's real. It is real.
Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
It has been. It's been too much fun. I appreciate you sticking around. If you have thoughts or experiences you want to share about grief, head on over to my Facebook page. I'd love to hear about them. The link will be in the description notes. Until next time, I wish you well.